Ernest is in Kansas City. Hi, Ernest. How are you?
Doing pretty good, Dave. How are you?
Better than I deserve. How can we help?
Hi. I was just wondering, what can I do to kind of protect the money we've saved from inflation?
Saved. Where is it saved?
We're just in savings accounts basically right now.
How much is in there?
Investment. $10,000 in the house fund, about $20,000 in the emergency fund.
Okay. The emergency fund you don't protect from inflation. That's not what it's for. It's there just for insurance, so when life happens, transmission goes out, somebody gets sick, somebody gets laid off, that's what it's for. It's not an investment. Investments have to be protected from inflation by investing at a rate of return that is higher than the inflation rate. And that's what you have to do. You have to make, the inflation rate is average in the last 72 years, 4.2%. Taxes add about another 2% to that. So you got to make over 6% on your money on a long-term investment to break even with taxes and inflation. And that's always been the case. These increases in prices have kind of recently in cars and houses and building supplies and other stuff has woke people up again on the dangers of inflation. But inflation's always been there to erode your long-term investing if you don't do that. And so, in other words, if you put money in a CD for 50 years at 1 or 2% and inflation is running 4%, obviously you're going backwards, and that's not handling your money well. But your emergency fund is not for that. Your house fund is going to be spent as a down payment on your house in the next couple of years, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, so inflation is not going to eat that up because it's not going to be in there long enough. Where inflation gets you is where you're dealing with something that's a 10, a 20, a 40-year investment. That's where inflation gets you. It doesn't get you in 12 months.
Okay.
That makes sense to you?
It makes sense, yeah.
House prices have jumped up this year. Car prices have jumped up, but that's not going to be a standard way. We're not going to see house prices go up 20% a year for 10 years. It's just not going to happen. If it does, we've got other issues in this economy. And that's just structurally not how we're wired in America. I just do not see that happening. But could we see it for coming off the pandemic? Can we see some of these things bump temporarily? You bet we have. Car prices are an example of that. And it's more due to shortages than it is anything else. And once the supply-demand curves equal out, it's going to slow the rate of these price increases. It's not a bubble, and it's not going to burst, and it's not going to go backward 50% or something like that 5 years from now. That's not what it's going to do. But this driving demand, people sat at home and spent no money except on Amazon for a year. And when they came out of their cave, they all went and bought a stinking house, and they all went and bought a stinking car. By the way, the lumber factories weren't open making 2x4s, and the car factories weren't open making cars. So we have this tremendous shortage of supply because the factories weren't operating, because there were little COVIDs running around in the factories and nobody wanted to go in there. And so they were, scared to death, and so we shut the factories down. We suppressed the economy. And that, so there was a shortage of 2x4s, not because there's this spike of demand, but because they weren't making freaking 2x4s. There's a shortage of glue to make plywood. Why? Because there's a big run on plywood? No, because the glue factory wasn't open. Yeah. Okay? It's a simple thing. So it's going to smooth out because they're gearing up like crazy. There's a shortage on ammunition. You know why? Biden. You can't buy bullets. Okay? It's why. And you know what? We're having all kinds, those of us that are firearms aficionados right now, we're having to check our ammo because they're making ammo so freaking fast at these factories trying to catch up that a lot of it's coming out defective, which is dangerous as crud. You can blow your gun up in your hand with a bad piece of bullet in there. And so, just got an email on that this morning. Some friends of mine just bought some bad stuff and just about got killed with it. So, but the point is the factories are gearing up like crazy trying to catch up. And as they catch up, you see how that's working, Ken? It's going to smooth everything out.
Well, I just want people to understand inflation can get really scary to people. And remember, the media exists to freak you out.
Okay, that's what it is. They're all talking about it. Huh?
Trust me, it's everywhere.
Oh,
Inflation in big bold letters.
Good.
And if you listen close enough, Dave, you lean in, you can literally hear the headline going, "Bum, bum, bum," and we're freaking people out. Here's the deal. All right. This is a short-term inflationary spike.
The other boogie monster died, so now we have to have a new boogie monster. The little COVID died, so now they got to have a new boogie monster.
Let's see where we are next year as to whether or not this is true inflation hike versus just a short-term spike because of the whole supply-demand thing. This thing's going to even back out. I absolutely think that's true, and people need to relax a little bit. Sit tight, weather this spike in meat prices and all the things that are all having to do with the distribution system and everything kind of going offline. It's going to take a while. This was the biggest artificial shutdown in the history
of mankind.
And so you don't just warm that machine back up. It takes a little while for it to get humming.
Well, and some of these corporations are more worried about optics than they are actual facts.
Absolutely true.
And so they're not reopening just because one crazy, activist or something is going to bitch about them being open.
17 people on Twitter.
Yeah, there's 17 people on Twitter still bitching about this stuff. And so they're all worried about how things look, not how they actually are. They're not really worried about somebody getting sick. They're worried about somebody bitching about them being open.
That's right.
That's what it is. And so these corporations have no soul, and they have no principles and no backbone. And so that's what's happened in these situations. And of course, those of us that did open and did run our businesses, we're trying to kill our employees.
Oh, yeah.
Dave Ramsey's trying to kill his employees.
Oh, yeah.
So, which is kind of counterproductive because I've got no employees. I got to go rehire them all, and it's a pain in the butt.
I know.
So it's killing them off's the problem. You don't want to kill them off. They're hard to replace. God, dumb. Yeah. So that's what's going on, though, man. So, Ernest, turn off the news.
Yes.
Turn off the news. Quit getting your financial advice from Fox News.
Yeah.
Quit getting your financial advice from CNN. For God's sakes, those people on the TV in front of you all have $120,000 of student loan debt. So don't let them talk to you about economics.
Yeah, and they don't even know what inflation is. It's only on the prompter in front of them. That's a fact. They don't even know what inflation is.
You ever seen Anchorman?
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever's there, they read.
Right. You're getting financial advice from Ron Burgundy. What's wrong with this picture? Right? He doesn't even know. It's just on the prompter. Yeah. And here's the scarier part. Dave, let's give him full behind the scenes. Not only is it Ron Burgundy reading something on a prompter, a 24 to 25-year-old producer typed it in there for him.
Yeah.
They don't understand economics.
Or inflation. See, I'm old. I remember Jimmy Carter.
Gas
I remember
lines.
Real inflation.
Right.
That was real inflation. That was not a supply-demand curve thrown off by a pandemic.
That's right.
Economic suppression. That's a different thing. We had bad monetary policy over a decade.
Yes.
From the 70s up into the 80s, and we were jamming at 10 to 15% inflation rate per year for a decade there. Yeah. I remember this.
What were interest rates at the height of that? Do you remember?
That was the resulting thing that ended the Carter administration for sure. Yeah, we had, when I was 20, let's see, 1981, I was 21, I was selling real estate. Interest rates for a home were 17%.
Goodness gracious.
Fixed rate, 17%. And that was the end of it. And let me here's the interesting thing. 3 years earlier, they were 10.
Yeah. Wow.
When I got my license at 18 years old in September, I remember it went from 9 3/4 to 10 for the first time in modern history. We had 10% mortgage rates, and people were screaming, ready to jump out of windows.
Oh, sure.
That the world was coming to an end, and little did they know it was going from 10 to 17 in only about 36 months. Yeah, just crazy. Yeah, that's real inflation. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about it on the short term, brother. You just don't have to worry about it in the short term. It's long term where inflation will kill you.